This time on Rad Rat Video, we're discussing what makes an impossible an impossible. When is it a 360 shove it? When is it something else? A zero flip maybe? What's all this stuff? Let's figure it out. Welcome back to Rad Rat Video. This is a channel about skateboarding in all of its forms. I play skateboarding video games, talk about skateboarding history, answer your questions here on Ask Rad Rat. You can submit your own question by going to radratvideo.com. There's a form right there on the homepage. I will read them all, and please do so. All right, the first question is from Paul Bunyan. I don't know if this is the same Paul Bunyan from before, but he says, I wanted to ask, what deck gave you the best experience? It catered to your preferences, it lasted a long time, or whatever criteria you prefer. You talked about buying decks in bulk, so you seem to be more pragmatic than emotional about the boards, but it's because of this I wanted to ask. Have a great day. You're not wrong. I definitely have spent a lot of time shopping for deals and getting the cheapest boards and buying clearance and getting blank decks and all that kind of stuff. But I wouldn't say any of that stuff that I've had was my favorite. There are two boards that I can think of that would qualify. First is my first Dark Star, which I believe was my first pro board. I'm not entirely sure, but it was the first one that I filmed stuff on. I may have had blanks first. I'm not sure, but it was my first like pro model board. I don't remember whose pro model or if it was a team deck or anything like that. I remember that it was a Dark Star and it was like silver. Like there was actual, reflective silver part of the board. And I just learned ollies and kick flips and stuff like that. And I was starting to do some weird freestyle stuff. And I remember I got this Dark Star and I loved it. I don't know whether it would be great if I had it right now, if the shape ended up being a great match for how I skate now or anything like that. But at the time, it was like my first real legit board, and I did a lot of stuff on it. I'm going to see if I have some footage of me skating it, but this footage is all incredibly hard to see, so you'll have to take my word that it's a Dark Star. The second, my first favorite board would be my Plan B. I got this as a graduation present from high school in 2006. Some of my friends got together and bought this board for me. It was a complete. It was a Plan B with tensors, and they were the painted ones. I always got raw metal because it saved $2 or however much. I don't remember the bearings or the wheels. I think they were graphic wheels. I always just had plain white. So my friends bought this for me, and that board, I wouldn't say it was like the best board in the world, but I have no complaints about it. I loved it. It didn't chip. It didn't break. It just slowly, scratched up and got worn down. Like it was really good. I never had any problems with it. The shape was good. I could do all my tricks on it just fine. I learned a bunch of good stuff. I skated on that board for a long time. So I've been showing you some footage of me skating this board. Footage is all terrible, but it is 2006. It's been a long time. But that board really sticks out to me. And I think it was because it was like, it's the whole complete, but the Plan B specifically was a nice treat. I would never have bought like the higher end stuff. And Plan B was my favorite company at the time. It was brand new again. So Plan B existed in the early 90s, and I loved all the videos that they put out back then. Questionable and secondhand smoke and all that type of stuff. I loved those. I watched them all the time. And then Plan B reopened somewhere around then. And I wanted one, but I was just buying blanks, and then I got gifted with a nice Plan B board, and it was really good, and all was well. So that is my best board memory that I have. Okay, next question is, if you had to choose any pro skater to have your back in a barroom brawl, who would it be? Mike V excluded. Let's keep it fair. All right, that's a good note there. It came up with two answers. First is Bam. Not because I think he would really hold his own in the fight. I just think he would be a great distraction. I feel like he would, he's not well. I wouldn't want to take advantage of him or anything like that. I hope he gets some help and he chills out. But if he was on my side and he was like on a table and jumped off on somebody, I feel like I could make my escape that way. He would be a good distraction for a fight. But I think a better answer would be Jaws. he can really take a beating, obviously. And he looks tough. He looks like he's been in some fights. And I feel like he would be somebody you wouldn't really want to get in a fight with. So if something happened at the bar and someone's about to, jump up in my face and Jaws comes up behind me, I feel like things might be okay. Or Brandon Biebel. I didn't put him in my notes, but I just thought of him. He's a really big dude. See this guy walk up behind me, then I feel like I would be a little bit safer. Never gotten in a bar fight. That may surprise you to hear that, but it's true. Next is from Josh. In Battle at the Barracks, there's a rule that says you can't slide your trick if your opponent popped theirs. Wouldn't it be a good strat to slide the tricks you can't do on offense so they can't be used against you on defense if your opponent pops theirs? And if that's the case, shouldn't sliding and popping one trick be considered as two separate tricks? That is an interesting strategy. So if I'm going into a game of skate and I know I can't do a 360 or a cab without sliding the second half of it, I do them all first. They still count as tricks, but I wouldn't be able to match with those. So if I do them all first, the other person loses the power to get me with them later. That makes sense. And I think it is really good the way that it's all written right now. Like you can't match a trick lazily. But if you set it that way, the other person can do it better than you. There's no reason they can't. So if I were to do like a tiny, going super slow, a kick flip just barely off the ground, and you match it going super fast, and you catch it waist high, like you didn't have to, but you did, and there's nothing wrong with that. So if I do a really bad spin that slides and is lazy, and you do a huge one fast, it's still the same trick. You just did it better, And I think it's fine to not consider them different tricks. But if people start to use your strategy a lot and it messes with the game, then they might put in that rule. But yeah, I think that makes sense. It's kind of a weird idea. It's like a defensive offense. You're setting tricks they can do because they can do them better. But I have seen that before, like with Costin and his normal hard flips, not switch, his normal hard flips. Like sometimes I'll try to set one because it might take him a couple tries. And if he does a couple tries on offense and does it, then he's not going to get screwed with it later. So, there's some strategies you can do. Next question is from Sebrin, who says, I was wondering if this and other similar tricks have a name. It's a tail slide on the other side of the ledge, making it look like a blunt slide. This could also work on board and lip slides, as you sometimes see at the end of a manual trick. Is there an actual name, or are we stuck with explaining the trick forever? It is called an ollie over blunt slide. And if you turned up the audio on that clip you sent me, they actually say the name. It's a Street League clip. Hopefully you saw it. You might not have for copyright reasons, but yeah, it's an ollie over blunt slide. And if you can do an ollie over crook, that's where that comes from. If you were to do it on like a flat bar, it's the same thing. On something like this, where you could grind both sides, they're technically different, because you could do an overcrook on the near coping or ollie over it to a normal crook on the other side, slightly different. But yeah, like you can do any kind of trick like that. So yeah, it's just called an ollie over blank, to no slide, tail slide, whatever, 5-0. It doesn't matter what trick it is, but yeah, it's an ollie over blank. So you don't have to describe it. That's what it's called. You do a front side, back side, all kinds of stuff. All right, next question is from Catman, who says, when is an impossible an actual impossible, or when does it become a 360 shove it? Rodney Mullen and Ed Templeton do actual impossibles, but most skaters nowadays do either a 360 shove it or a kind of weird looking impossible with just their toes touching the board, and they call it an impossible. I always thought an impossible was the board fully wrapped around the skated foot. All right. So the problem with an impossible is that you can't really wrap it all the way. If you were to do a fully, like a vertical impossible like this, your back foot lands way up forward. It won't be on the bolts. It starts on the tail, lands toward the middle because, it wraps around and it never loses contact with the board. So you have to kind of lose contact for a second at the end at the very least. But it's complicated, and the way that I like to do them and the way that I think they feel best is if you start it kind of straight up, and then the board ends up kind of flat. So you're kind of changing the direction of the spin as you are in control of it with your foot. starting to flip and you pull it around. And that way, that feels the best to me. My foot is in contact with the board the whole time, except for the end. You try to catch it and slide your back foot back to the bolts. But yeah, you start it and then you change it in the air. That's the way that I like to do them. I think that they feel the best that way. Feels the most like an impossible. Just having your foot in contact with the board is kind of a gray area. If you were to do a really flat, like a 360 shove it, but you just do this with your ankle, you're not guiding the board, you're not changing the direction of it, you're not really doing anything other than touching it. And that, it's hard to call it anything other than an impossible because you don't just catch a 360 shove it instantly and, keep it with you. So I don't think you could call it anything other than an impossible, but it's not like a really nice one. One time I did a zero flip. I've also heard it called a monster flip, although I think zero came first. It's where the board just does a straight up back flip like that. That's it. And I was messing around and I learned that trick, and you just kind of pop back. Like pop like this and push your foot back and way up like that, and the board will just backflip. And I did one and I filmed it and I put it on Instagram, and I was like, hey, this is my first zero flip. And people are like, oh, that's a nice impossible you did there. And with the camera angle, you can't tell that it's not touching my foot. If it was, though, my point is, if it was, it's not affecting it. It's not doing anything. The board's flipping, and if my toe just kind of happens to be like in the way slightly, yeah, it's an impossible. I can't call it anything else, but it's not a good one. So yeah, scooping the board out, pulling it back, changing the direction, anything where you're controlling the board with your foot, that's the way I feel is the ideal way to do it. I have a trick tip form right here if you want to learn the trick. But yeah, definitely getting a nice, to make it look different than a 360 shove it or a backflip. Somewhere in between is kind of the best way for me. That's my thoughts on that. If you have any more questions, go to radratvideo.com and submit them right there on the homepage. I will get them all. I will read them all. You can also submit them through Patreon. You will definitely get an answer either written or on video if you do it that way. And you can also support the channel by joining it. Click the join button. You get some perks. I read through all the member comments and I try to respond to them all and stuff like that. And click that button to learn some more about that. And that's it for now. Thanks for hanging out.